no thank you. No, video away, absolutely. This is my better side. So video. Jokes won't get any better. Okay, I'm sorry, just steal yourself now. Thanks all for coming. In particular, thanks for coming on 5:30 on what was a really cool day so far. So I know everyone's lagging, but we're going to try and be pumped. I'm over-caffeinated, so yeah, everyone excited. And so you all know that we're talking about badges today. The title, Gamification Learning, does education need some stinking badges, right? So anytime you talk about badges, you have to make the joke about stinking badges. I don't think audio works on my video clip, so I'm just going to reenact it for you, okay? With no stereotype accents whatsoever, okay? Wait a minute.
I ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
All right, just that's the original, right? That's the original joke, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. It's an Academy Award-winning movie. Can you believe they got away with stuff like that? All right. Just to quickly tell you a little bit about us. I'm Sam, Meghan, and Ross. We are from Pittsburgh. And those who didn't clap obviously haven't been there yet. Okay. Meghan and I are over at the Learning Research and Development Center. Ross is over at the Carnegie Mellon National Robotics Engineering Center. And most importantly, by the way, this is our very first PAX. So, go easy on us. But we will also be switching back and forth, and all three of us will be talking throughout this presentation. So just bear with us when we do these transitions. We are learning scientists. All of us are learning scientists. Ross has the addition of being a roboticist. And you'll see why all that's kind of important as we get into it. But games and learning isn't something that's particularly new anymore. It's been around for quite some time. There was some real early stuff a long time ago, even before Math Blaster. And yes, and obviously I'm using very loose terms in terms of game and learning. Sorry, Math Blaster fans, but I know I'm calling you out. But that stuff has gotten a lot more complex, right? There's been a lot, particularly on the research side, investigations in science. There is now even a conference totally devoted to games and learning. If you've never been to like the Games Learning Society conference in Madison, it's really, really awesome. Lots of people from a lot of different avenues come and talk. I mean, it might be a crowd very similar to even the one in this room, believe it or not. But today we want to talk to you specifically as scientists. So a lot of times when people talk about games and learning, they talk about what the potential is, they talk about what could be, they talk about things like, well, this should work, or a game should be, a game is really an ultimate teaching tool. But for us, we're scientists, right? We care about, this stuff, and we really believe in science, right? So when you have like formulas, when you can actually cite evidence and proof. Oh, sorry, everyone on that side. I'm not sure what happened there. It says science, it works. There's kids in this room, right? So B word, right? But the point is that for us, when we investigate games and learning, we want to see evidence, hardcore evidence that this stuff works. But at the same time, also, we're not pie in the sky people either. We're all kind of ex-educators and teachers, and so you can have a lot of fun doing games and learning, but we want to be practical. We're interested in really kind of seeing change. So for us, it's not, necessarily, what could be, or we're not even like thinking about kind of proof of concepts. We want to come up with ideas about games and learning and put it into action. And so what we chose very specifically is kind of a gamification of learning, and we took it in the form of badges. So a badge can mean a lot of different things. Oh, we're back. Excellent. So let's really just kind of quickly define what is a badge, right? We all know kind of what, the achievement or the trophy model, right, is in terms of badges. But I suspect a lot of people in here have even thought about like what other kind of badges you can get in life, right? Actually not. Wow, what a shame. Laughter will only come from this side. This side's going to be totally serious. That, by the way, says achievement unlocked, get a wife. And any joke is funnier, right, when you say it out loud. Right? So, I mean, as people really into gaming, right, it seems kind of obvious, the video game model of achievement. But let's just slow down for a second, right, and remind ourselves that there are other models of kind of badges, right, particularly the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts of America, right? That's a kid, that's a kid who actually earned every single, it's an Eagle Scout, earned every single badge possible. But the point there being that there is this kind of video game model of badges, right? Where it's almost kind of like meta achievements, It's not like, you're not just winning the game, but you've got additional things you can earn a badge for. And then there's like this scouting model of badges, right? Which is kind of almost like a finished kind of certificate or an indicator that you've mastered some type of skill or knowledge. So what do the badges look like in action? I'm going to pass the presentation over to Ross.
So I'm Ross, and I'm from Carnegie Mellon Robotics Academy, and we are an educational outreach program, part of the National Robotics Engineering Center. So it's a place that makes lots of great robots, and we try to use those to further educational causes. And I can't see my side, so I'm going to go this way. And a couple of examples of things that are out there. There are lots of great learning tools that are available that leverage robotics, programming, and other related technologies. An example on the left, Robot Virtual Worlds is a 3D simulated environment that uses the language robots see. It's an integrated programming environment that uses the exact same code, whether you're programming a Lego robot, a Vex robot, some of the larger stuff works with Arduinos. It also works with 3D virtual robots on the screen, and you can literally take the code that you write with your virtual robot and you can transfer it over to a physical robot or vice versa. As you might imagine, this comes in very handy in a class where robots are $300 a pop. Maybe you don't have enough, or maybe you actually want to assign something like homework, and you can't take the $300 robot home with you. So this opportunity is available. Another thing that you could do is, anybody here know Alice Scratch? Okay, so programming-based environments where students can build animations using script, and a computer script, or build games, in fact, using those same techniques. And they're all designed for learners in the elementary, middle school, and high school ranges. So these are very accessible, and they're very powerful. So knowing that these things are out there, what if we could take them, put them all together in sort of one place, and use some powerful tool, if only there's some powerful tool we could find, to help teachers to implement them in classrooms by taking badges. And as you go through a game, you tend to earn a badge, you often see a completion bar. Well, if you lay those out end to end, then you can sort of map out a student's progress, or at the very least see if a student is getting ahead, behind. And of course, we all know that kids love badges, and that should be the end of the story, right?
Right, seems like it's a good idea, right? Badges, right? But we weren't kidding about the practical part, right? What could badges do for people who want to learn, right? And that's kids and adults, right? So specifically, we wanted to focus on learning, but it's, again, that practicality piece rears its head. And so we're not going to try and create a panacea that's going to solve all learning problems. We thought, okay, why not concentrate on a particular learning problem? So we talked about assessment. Now, when we talk about assessment, we're talking about kind of this very strict scientific definition of the word, right? So everyone here knows assessment, everyone here 100% has taken a test of some form, right? And a test is a type of assessment, but all assessments are not just tests. Some assessments are just measures of how much you learn. But there's a problem, right, with assessments, particularly in terms of the way they're most often used, right? So either we assess the wrong thing, right? Like the kids are just not learning something, and we're going to assess something that they didn't learn, or if it's an adult, you take a test over skills that you never had an opportunity to learn or really won't make a difference to you. And then no one really likes tests anyways, right? At least the standardized form of tests. I guarantee even the people who do extremely well at tests, at least the scientific research indicates that those people still, while they might even actually do well on the test, they worry about the test. They could have learned so much more, with a different type of test. So to get even more specific about the problems with tests, there are unmeasured skills, right? So if you take a test in, let's say, algebra, right? You might be able to answer the questions multiple choice. Given a real world algebraic problem, you might not be able to solve the actual problem, and so it's great that you did well on a multiple choice test, but it doesn't mean that you actually have learned it. In addition, there are things like unmeasured skills. To get specific, unmeasured skills. If you work well with others, if you're kind of a good co-student or a good colleague, there's no real test for that, right? At least not in the traditional sense. So it's unfortunate, right? There's no way for you to measure, it's no way for society to measure that kind of advancement. Okay, the bad test. There's not often really benefit to taking a test. I mean, there's a couple, right, like the SAT or just kind of, accumulating, enough kind of, points or grades or something to graduate out of something. But beyond that, there doesn't seem to be like a direct benefit. I mean, do you really get anything personal out of taking a test? And then, of course, like if you get a test and you get a grade back or a number or an indicator, you got a certain percentage right, or you got a B or a C on the test, that doesn't really tell you a lot about how much you've learned, right? So it's not particularly good feedback. So the badges actually provide an opportunity to really improve, specifically assessment. You can award a badge for almost anything, right? So they can increase the amount of opportunities to actually assess things. You could create a badge for teamwork, and in fact, there are some badges like that. If a test, isn't particularly kind of motivating, right? You earn a badge. I mean, that in and of itself is motivating. I mean, there's a reason why, there are Xbox achievements and PlayStation trophies. It's not just kind of to waste time. It's because people really like earning them. You can display a badge somewhere, whether it's like, on an online profile or whether it's an actual physical badge, right? You can actually display it, right, which provides some additional benefit, and we'll get into kind of a little bit more about that later. But and the more badges you earn, right, provides a lot more feedback in terms of how much you're learning or what skills or knowledge you've actually mastered.
Right, so the issue with that is that not all badges are going to do the same work. And so often what happens when we talk to people about badges, and they'll say, oh, we're doing research on this new badge thing, and they're like, oh, like a sticker? Or like and they really don't understand that the badge can carry a lot of power if it's done well. But it could also, just like a gamification of learning for math that just involves a game on top of whatever you're learning, isn't necessarily embedded within the content. And so it loses steam there. You're not really showing kids how to value and really understand what's going on with the content, but you're just kind of slapping something on top of it. And so what we want to look at, what we see that as happening is really you're just trying to feed kids some sugary, sweet, but still really awful snacks. And so kids are it's very sad, I think, that kids are so often underestimated. And they can tell that that's just an awful snack, and thanks for the crap. Like, it's just not a good time. So we really take badges seriously and focus on kids' voices and what they mean to them and what this means in content. And so how can we make effective badges that motivate students? And so we, coming from a field of learning science, have an opportunity to look across a variety of disciplines. And so learning sciences sits at this really neat center of design and technology and cultural studies and cognitive science and all these things about learning and culture. And so we are really looking at this coming together of all these factors for us to look at. One second. All right, so when all these things come together, it gives us the opportunity to look into specific contexts to see what kind of innovations are around. how can designs be implemented and what feedback can we receive from that through research in order to understand the effects that those things have on learning and engagement and student choice and decisions. And so we could look across all of these, and this is kind of an iterative process. Ideally, all these things should be in line. And so part of what happens is sometimes people grab onto just the motivation, but don't really understand the context or don't really understand badges. And sometimes people focus on the badges, but not necessarily the outcomes. And so what our goal here is, through learning science, is to really bring these things together. And so we've looked across, all these theories are out there. So, I mean, there are so many theories that keep researchers busy. But if you boil that down to really what are we going to take away from this, we see some themes that are really important to kids. And one of these is that is identity, if you can't see it. So kids, when you talk about badges, what they're doing in the content, the badges, what it means to them, should have something to do with their identity. Who do they see themselves as? And, you know, a 10-year-old has some preferences. It's not going to be a matter of, oh, just, you know, whatever the teacher says, they'll be fine. They really do care about these kinds of things and how they see themselves. Value, so these badges could speak to how kids value different things in their life. And it's an opportunity for teachers and educators to show students the value of the content that they're learning. Interest, so when kids are fascinated about something, they often will persist longer. And so if you can show them the beauty in whatever you're doing. So math is, you know, not inherently always entertaining for kids, but if you show them the value, help them to understand how it could be applied to other things that they value. Connectedness, so this idea that through badges, kids have an opportunity to learn with each other, to see how their interests can merge with their peers. And so it's not just a teacher-driven environment. And then also choice. So badges can give kids the choice to say, okay, I like these, so this little girl's ice cream, I like these toppings, but not that so much. It kind of allows kids to choose the kinds of badges that they want. What do they want to say about themselves and how do they want to portray themselves? Yeah.
So, the initial approach to badges maybe wasn't quite complete enough. That was our level 1 understanding of badges, which a lot of us probably walked in the door with. We certainly did. You mentioned the word iteration. Iteration very well describes the process that we're going through in developing this system. So we figured, let's take a step back, let's look at what the learning science says, and let's try to build a better system. So up at the top there, we've got those activities, which we've always had. But then we'll take a look at, okay, so students are earning these badges, what good can it do for them? Well, one thing that it could do is connect up a little better to their eventual goals. You do learning with the eventual plan, hopefully, to do something with it. Industry is one such destination, and it turns out industry has actually had a notion of badges for a very long time, right? Their certifications are usually pieces of paper instead of digital artifacts. But they're there. And so we began designing the system not around this idea of let's take badges, which are basically chocolate, and put them on activities, which, while good, aren't really benefiting from having badges just sort of carelessly slapped on top of them. And let's try to align these systems so that the earning of badges can say something to a learner about their identity, can point towards something of value, and that could be, I see myself as heading down this career path now. I'm heading for something that will ultimately be of value to me. But let's take that even a step further. So you can earn these badges, and we try to tier the badges to keep things in perspective, because you could do something very small and earn a badge. You can also do something really awesome that's taken you months and months and earn a badge. We'd like to make sure that people can see the difference when they look at your badges. But let's, in fact, go a little bit further than that, and let's make sure that these things keep the classroom and informal learning environments in mind, because the teacher is an indispensable part of this. We've actually tried at some point to use an artificial intelligence-based tutor to essentially make the teacher not have to do anything in the classroom in the middle of a robot math lesson. You can guess how that turned out. Yeah, it turns out humans are actually very smart. AI is only smart at very specific things. That didn't happen to be one of them at the time. And so the idea of badges as motivation, badges as encouragement, but also a badge as a marker of qualification applies very well to teachers, because if a teacher can teach something, especially something that you're not going to go take a college course in robotics just so you can teach Lego to your middle school class, if you could go out, do a week-long professional development, or even do it online, and earn a badge marking your qualifications, then this seems like a perfectly logical fit. By including it in the system, it also means that we can grant internally at a software level privileges to these users to hold classes, to approve student passing of classes or of use of material. And so we evolve our understanding from that sort of naive state to one that tries to take much better advantage of the learning science and knowledge that's out there. One last step in this thing is to get out of the self-contained system. Learning is much bigger than we can hope to capture in a single online environment, right? And so Mozilla and a number of other players out in the space figured out that, yeah, this is going to be a really big deal. Badges have a lot of potential, and in order to unlock that potential, these different badge systems, the one over at Khan Academy, the one that's CS2N, they're going to need some sort of common interchange format. And so one of the projects that is out there, in fact, it just went into 1.0 release last week, Thursday or so, is called Open Badges. And the idea is very simple and straightforward. You've got badges, you put them in a common inter-exchange format, and you enter them into an ecosystem of badges where there are people issuing badges, there are places that sort of collect the badges that students have earned, tie them to a common identity, and then you can take those and you can display them in all the places where you might like to talk about, display, or show off your credentials. For example, your Facebook page or your LinkedIn, right? For those of us who are a little farther down the career path. But your blog or anything else as well. So the idea becomes, let's build a system with these badges and let's not just layer them on top of what already exists. We're going to get a little bit into the anatomy of a badge, not too crazy. Up at the top, you've got your title, you've got, when you earned it. This is all pretty standard stuff, right? World of Warcraft did this like 5 years ago. In terms of requirements, you want requirements that are clear, easy to understand, but you also want them to say enough that they're believable. So we could say, yes, you passed a test, but it's both more sort of secure, it's hard to game the system if we have one checkbox that says, yes, you passed the test and you passed it well. But you also have a digital signature from your teacher who had received one of those teacher badges. Right? So now you have a human verifying something that the machine found, and this badge suddenly starts to have a lot better credibility. Finally, there's this notion of pathway. What is a pathway? Well, let me actually give you an example. Who here knows Lego makes robots? Okay. Who is involved in some way or knows a kid who is involved in a First Lego League competition? Okay, so First Lego League is this program that's run as a joint venture between Lego and First, which is for inspiration and recognition in science and technology. So it's this organization that's been doing robotics, competition-based education for a long time. And they're very popular. The middle school division of this had 12,000 teams back in 2011, and the number has certainly gone up since then. If you figure there are maybe 10 students per team, you realize quickly that we're reaching hundreds of thousands of middle school students. And they design, build, program robots to accomplish challenges on a game board. They do research projects to accompany them. It's actually a really great program. What not so many people know is that the language that the Lego robots are programmed in, sorry guys, on this side of the room, the language that the Lego robots are programmed in is actually based on an engineering language that's used in industry. So the same language that students are using to program their robots in 6th grade is very closely related to a language that engineers are using to conduct experiments and program underwater autonomous rovers and design and test jet planes. So why is it that a student who works on these things should be so fundamentally disconnected from the idea that this is a path that they can follow that will be of value to them, and that their identity shouldn't be one of, yes, I could be a programmer, I actually want to follow this path? A lot of the problem is simply a disconnect, right? Nobody equates these two things as being connected in their heads. So one logical thing to do would be to connect them by making sure the curriculum's in place, and that's something that we work on. But also, illustrating this, it looks like a really long path. But the badge can provide an illustration of this, a way of communicating it that everybody understands. That this is really just a sequence of achievements. If you continue down this path, then you can get from your point A to your point B. And earn some badges along the way.
So when we talk about badges, some of the work that we've been doing, we really have been looking at what kind of badges. And so there isn't a one badge fits all, and especially not for different contexts and kids. So it raises this question of, okay, what kind of badges, what are we trying to measure? And often we want to know, okay, it may not be, we want to know that you're good at math. It may be something that is less directly assessed. typically. And so Sam mentioned collaboration, acceptance, information literacy. So can you make sense of your world in a way where you understand how to cite information, get sources, understand how to synthesize things. These more like 21st century learning skills type direction. And so badges have an opportunity to be an alternative form of assessment, not in a bad way, but in a way that actually supports some real world skills that kids are going to need going forward, especially being that everything is getting, jobs are being more creative, more interdisciplinary. These things are important to think about how kids are learning them. And also for which kids. So not all kids are going to like the same kind of things. And so really, when we do our research, we are really looking at the context kids are learning in, what kind of badges would apply there, what kind of kids, what motivates those kids specifically. And then also in what environments. And so there's formal environments in school, which has a different structure. You know, you have the teacher, the students, the school days broken up versus the Lego League, for example, where there's some formality, there's competitions, there's teams, and then also there's scouts, which are, you know, a whole different system. And so, again, there's not one size fits all. We have to think about in each context. And then also there's this question of how it relates to more standardized achievement. And so part of what I think the research that we're doing helps is to legitimize the importance of badges in relation to achievement. And so it seems like there might be a tension between the two, but actually they could be complementary in that badges really are a way to look at different skills that support those skills that are more traditionally assessed. But it also gives kids a way to bring in their own interests into school, into across contexts in which they experience their world.
Okay, so let's go into the third iteration here. We're going to keep on spiraling forever, by the way, or at least until we can't go any further. So some of the notions that are beginning to creep into this idea, right? We've talked about, well, you can understand badges from a naive point of view, and they don't do much. You build a system that tries to use badges to interconnect things. And we talked about the idea of building an ecosystem, which takes these badges and tries to make real use of them in real-world settings. Now, once you get out into that world, though, and we can issue badges, you can earn badges. What do you do with the badge exactly? I mean, how do you make it have value? Ultimately, you want these things to go to LinkedIn. Well, somebody has to be able to see it on LinkedIn and say, not just, yeah, I see it, but I see it and it means something to me. And so this is actually kind of where we are in the badge conversation. This is something that started very recently. And the idea is that the badge ecosystem has consumers. So a consumer of a badge, somebody looks at it and says, yeah, I'll give you credit for that. So who's going to use them? Who's going to accept the badges? And will it be for credit? What are the steps we have to take to issue badges that are worth something? And part of that is the notion of trust. So when you issue badges out into the world, anybody can do this, by the way. You can go online, you can go to openbadges.org, you can earn badges there. You can also find lots of links to projects that are really designed for a teacher or an after-school program or just anybody to set up and start issuing badges. And that's a good thing. When these badges get out into the world, though, it falls heavily to the consumer, the interpreter, to figure out what this badge means and how much to value it, right? Because they're all sort of out there, and the ecosystem software, Mozilla, doesn't want to take sides. These issues have to sort of work themselves out. And so another big question that's on the horizon is how do you capture the notion of trust that says that, well, this badge over here, this represents a lot of work, and somebody's going to stand behind it. It could be CMU and the Robotics Academy. It could be MIT standing behind a Scratch badge. That would make it more credible, but how do you do that in a way that doesn't just replicate the existing structure for approving credentials from the top down, right? Because it's fundamentally a very top-down system. There are some people at the top who have the approval wand, and they wave the approval wand or the accreditation wand. And all the information bubbling up from the bottom is just going to sort of slide into an abyss of nothingness. So how do you get a system that can capture that kind of assessment peer-to-peer on the ground by teachers in formal and informal education and value? Oops, and I bumped the thing, sorry. Okay, one more notion to expand on, this idea of pathways. Because we want it to work, one of the ideas is that badges can actually start becoming your portfolio. And by portfolio, I actually mean more along the lines of this could be a part of your resume. It could replace a good chunk of your CV. And how do you do that? Well, you want to illustrate paths of learning from activities that you may have completed at some point. So, for example, if I click over on that, maybe I've done something in Robot C, and that's qualified to be the first step along this computer science pathway here. And so you can see that you've got one badge. The next step is pretty straightforward. You could earn that, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's not, as long as it's something that's qualified to fit in that spot. And they lead up to what's actually the computer science principles standards framework. Anybody who doesn't know, computer science is actually undergoing a change right now, especially at the AP level. They used to have like a first semester college-like course, the first and second college semester-like course. The full year one is gone, and they're actually migrating it downward to capture the idea of computer science principles at sort of a pre-first semester level, but it's all about computational thinking, and it's not really about knowing C++ and or Java. The other thing to note is that there are a collection of badges at the bottom. So as you collect these badges, those little slots at the bottom align with the key cornerstones of the framework. So computer science is fundamentally a creative endeavor, right? It's not sitting at your computer typing random things. It's building code to accomplish a goal. You want to build a site. You want to build an application or an app. And so the idea is simply badges can be earned. Pick some, build yourself a little showcase. So it takes the notion of a trophy case and turns it into your portfolio for use in your college application or your job search. And you can follow that, and you can earn things wherever you earn them. For those who are in education, you probably know that there is a huge emphasis on standards. Turns out this is actually useful for us to do anyway. So there's a set of data in a badge that talks about what standards in various learning frameworks. Now it could be Common Core, which is the sort of big set of national-ish standards. Or it could be something like computer science standards that aren't even fully finalized yet. You may know that they're redoing the science standards, the next-gen science standards in this country. And you can say that this badge speaks to those credentials. This is good because it helps a teacher figure out where to put in the classroom. It's also good because it means that when you're searching Google to try and find some activity that will help you hit a specific learning objective, these standards are machine discoverable, and so they'll start showing up on the radar. And so in the future, when you start looking for a way to teach a concept or reinforce a concept, you may turn to Google like you do for everything else. And so I guess to just sort of wrap up our part here, we've been on this trip where we sort of said, hey, badges are good. Badges are magic. And as our understanding evolved, past the really naive stage and really through a second and third iteration, we've come to realize that what you should be looking at with badges is not that they're going to do magic, but the word magic turns out to be a convenient organizer for what we do believe they can do. Badges can be used to motivate students, adult learners. Badges are very much used for assessment of learning for learners. Badges can also be used to guide a learner in their path. They can identify qualified individuals, and they can become machine discoverable, so you can find somebody with a certain qualification. And they can be used to certify people who are qualified.
Okay, so if you're curious about what is next and how we're involved and how you might get involved, there are a couple different ways, things that we're doing. So we talked a lot about the robotics and the different programs going on. We are also doing things in formal learning environments in middle schools. And there's a push for this more generally, but our research has actually we're looking at a number of middle schools getting involved in seeing how a structured badge system that has been built across different foundations and organizations getting together and putting this forward in the school, getting the kids involved. How is that playing out? What does that look like in a school? And how are kids feeling about it? How are the teachers feeling about it? How would that even work? So that's one area. And then we're also looking at informal learning environments. So things like the Lego League, things where kids are not necessarily doing the same thing with one teacher, but more self-selected activities in a bigger environment with different activities with their peers as well.
Right, so OBI, the open badges, if you're looking to get involved, especially if you happen to be in education or be in software development, I know that they are looking for active community involvement with the Open Badges project. It is an open standard, it is a Mozilla project, it is open source, and they're continuing to develop it, and they would love input. Other things that are happening as we speak, the Digital Media and Learning Conference was just last week, and I don't know if anybody's heard of the Chicago Summer of Learning. But the city of Chicago is embarking on this project to issue badges for every piece of learning, formal or informal, that happens over the course of summer 2013. And so they are trying to roll this thing out in mass scale, so that all those little, bits and stuff that you do, if you get involved with a maker project, anybody here know makers, right? Build stuff, really cool stuff. So they're doing all of that, and they're trying to use badges to document all that learning, which otherwise goes unnoticed when you get back to class in September.
Right, so just to kind of wrap up, talk to us. You want to do this? You're interested in badges? You want to implement it? We can tell you what the resources are. We can tell you the research. All of what we were talking about earlier today is all really based on research. We have, you can't really ever say this kind of in academia or as a scientist. We have the only published research on badges based on empirical evidence. If you want to see it, let us know. We're happy to share it. But if that's not kind of your cup of tea, and you just want to get out there and do stuff, still come talk to us, right? Because we can connect you with the people that can help you, whether you want to talk to developers at Mozilla about kind of the OBI system. If you're just a teacher and you want to just roll out badges in your classroom, what's the way to do it? We've done that. We can help you. We can give you even materials to help you do that. If you're interested in implementing badges in some kind of after-school program, we can tell you about the different boys and girls club groups that have done badges. And if you want to study about badges, and you want to get a PhD, maybe in badgeology, talk to me, right? I'm starting to look for grad students. But the nice thing about badges, and if you ever get involved with the badge community, is you learn very quickly that it's people just talking to each other, and that's where some of the real innovation comes from. So we'd like to open the floor for anyone who has questions, and if you don't, we have questions for you about badges. So you better ask, and we're going to start interrogating you. That's our contact information. There, that's me, Sam, that's Megan, that's Ross. If you're interested, CS2N, by the way, that's a real system. You can log on, you can go, and you can start learning about robotics and earning badges. Right? It's open general public, right? Yeah.
If you have a question, please step up to behind the projectors.
Thank you, by the way.
Hi guys, really good presentation. I had a question. Are you seeing much of this rolled out in open learning environments, particularly in distance education? Right now I'm working on a project with Moodle and how to create personal learning environments for small colleges based on an open source platform. Have you guys seen much integration with that kind of thing?
Yeah, right. So definitely. In fact, I think probably maybe the best example is P2PU, the peer-to-peer university. Mm-hmm. They're kind of one of the early pioneers of badges, right? And if you don't know it, it's a really cool system where basically the idea is that if you want to learn something, just go online and the community will teach you it in one way or another. So there are definitely systems like that. Because those kind of systems are a little bit more fringy, right, to established education, there isn't a general consensus or movement toward them, but there are systems that it's easy to connect. So again, just tell us, email me, tell me about your system, and we'll
you'll be getting an email.
All right, excellent.
Also, just to add on to that, CS2N and P2PU were actually both part of a grant awardee group from the Digital Media Learning Competition. We're actually two of 32 or so projects that were given small grants to try and see and to pioneer the initial development of badges for the open badge ecosystem to see how it's going to play out. So you can find lots of examples if you go to openbadges.org, and I believe those sites are also linked to CS2. So we're part of the community that's really trying to push this forward as we speak. So this is hot right now.
I feel like we got to switch to the poor side of it. God almost had epileptic.
So this is really exciting, and I'm not in the academic space, but I am in the commercial business, whatever space. I work for a web development company. To make it real sharp, we develop our own internal tools to do project management, login hours, all this stuff, and we actually have a couple televisions that display our dashboard that shows just where projects are. lot of complex stuff. But one of the things that we really want to do this year is actually implement a badge system. For example, let's say we have to log in hours every day, because if we don't, it's not from it is a business standpoint, but also from a scheduling standpoint, because we got so many projects coming in, we have to make sure that our hours are on task. So, we've already are already talking about, we have one badge that, you log in your first hour, boom, badge. You log in, 10 project hours, you get another badge and stuff like that. And we've tried in the last year or two, we've developed and designed a lot of internal administrative systems for really, really boring stuff, like awful stuff that no one would ever want to do. And we tried to pitch the idea of, like, you could create achievements or badges or even like leveling, for these systems, so to motivate people, or what we think would help motivate people to complete their tasks, keep a positive attitude. So I guess, have you guys, a lot of it was academic, but I mean, what do you guys think about that commercial business space, and handling that with rewards and badges and stuff like that? How successful or how positive do you think that would be?
So I just want to point out two things. One is that if the use of badges and the consideration is given to them stops at the level of, well, people like to earn badges, so this will motivate them, then that's exactly what we sort of thought at our first iteration as well. And it turns out not to work very well. I'll hand the microphone over to Sam in a second, because he has far more research-based detail on exactly how that works. I'd also just want to throw out as a point, though, that Amazon actually used badges internally for a number of years. And there might be some stuff up that you could find further on that project. But I know they were trying to accomplish some of the same things. Some things it's Amazon, right? So some zany and some not so zany. But I think some common goals in mind there.
Yeah, so when you start doing it, so the short answer is like, great, just prove it, right? Just collect some kind of data, show it, right? So I mean, that's, maybe the academic in me talking, right? But really just, let's see, the proof's in the pudding, right? And things get complicated quick. So in one study that we got, we kind of like divided people into like how much they knew beforehand going into like the learning system, or whatever the system was, and then we divided the badges into like badges, attaboy, good job badges versus badges like, oh, you mastered something. And what was amazing was that there was big differences, right? So for people who knew a lot, getting those badges that really rewarded them for like skill, that increased their motivation to learn more in like very good ways. The people who didn't know as much going into kind of the learning system, the skill badges didn't really have an effect on them. Now, the attaboy, good job badges, guess what? Had a negative effect. Actually made them worry more about now how many badges they were earning, right? Instead of just learning. So it gets very complicated. I'm not trying to say like, good job badges are all bad, but what it means is that who you're going to give badges to and what types of those badges are makes a big difference. And so it's, many different layers down that.
For just a second, I have you go back to the later slide, one of the slides that seemed to mess with that.
Later slide.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
I don't know which, we got lots of Lego slides, I don't know if you know.
Which one? Will we hit on it?
This
That
one? That would be.
Yeah, that was it. Thanks.
Right.
I've come to PAX a few times, met with entrepreneurs, marketers, developers, artists. I'm gonna put this down so I can talk loud enough for everybody to hear me. One repeated phrase I've heard in gaming is, you can't hear me? No. All right. My mistake. Anyway, one repeated phrase I've heard from all these people is that gaming is a data-driven industry. So along these lines, I've also learned going with your gut feelings from a business perspective in terms of what you think will work for a game without putting a prototype into the hands of gamers can lead to a game that nobody wants. I grew up with games like Math Blaster, Rita Rabbit, Carmen Sandiego, and Storybook Weaver. And personally, I see almost no value in badges, achievements, or trophies. I never wanted to chase the carrot on the stick, and I worry that this kind of mentality in education doesn't teach students to love to learn or ask the question of why they're learning. I found learning through narratives in the games I just mentioned to be a more engaging and lasting experience, an experience I feel genuinely passionate about. However, I recognize, a panel like this wouldn't exist if there wasn't some interest in badges. So given your background as learning scientists, can you speak a little more to the empirical evidence for your magic?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, excellent, right? So you make a very great, you make a great point, right? Which is to say, if I'm going to summarize, right, is that you got to do this stuff, because if you don't do something, if you don't like put badge systems out there, right, it's going to be hard to innovate. But at the same time, if you don't bother to like watch what you're doing or re-examine or reflect upon it, then you're going to have these badge systems which are going to be garbage, right? They're not going to motivate. They're going to turn people off. So one of the cool things about learning science research, right, is it's very big on what they call design-based studies, right? Which is to say, create something, put it in action, but watch what you're doing, right? Collect the data, and then once you collect the data, you don't say, okay, take a seat back, and say, oh, now let's crawl back into our ivory tower and tell the world what we think. No. Now take that data and put it into action. Quickly fix the system, right? So based on just the conclusion that we talked about earlier, right, about how the performance badges might not be effective, we changed CS2N right away, right? We actually changed the types of badges, and we actually expect this kind of to be a very iterative process. And so the empirical evidence, right, isn't conclusion, right? It's not saying this is how badges should be. It's saying this is what we found so far about badges. We still see room for potential in this direction, maybe not so much in that direction. So we're going to go now in this direction, and you're going to see another study, and you're going to see another study, and you're going to see more and more evidence. It's got to start somewhere, right? And will it ever be a panacea? No, probably not, right? Although I can dream, right? But the point being that that iterative process is one of the best ways to avoid kind of that problem situation you were talking about.
I also want to throw out something. It's a common, I don't know if it's just a way of thinking about it or phrasing it, but the badges are often confused with being the thing that does the teaching. Badges are not the things that do the teaching. Badges can be combined with effective, interesting, intriguing, innovative learning opportunities, but they are not learning opportunities unto themselves.
Right, so then what purpose do they serve is really my question. What's the mission statement of the badge?
Okay, so I wish I could give you a succinct answer, and the reason why I can't give you a succinct answer is because it's even debatable, right? But so you could say the mission of the badge is two things. One is it to provide all those things that assessments currently don't, right? It's, and the other thing too is that for some, not for everyone, for some it motivates, right? And so if we can figure out for who it motivates, right? Figure out who are those targeted learners and to give them the right kind of badges, we're going to probably boost motivation to learn minimally and potentially actually reward people who are currently, let's say, turned off by education. I mean, it's a segment of the population. It's not going to be for everybody. There are people who are very successful in school right now and learn a ton. They don't need badges. For instance, our study, our research has been, one of our studies was in a middle school classroom in a charter school in a low SCS neighborhood, socioeconomic status neighborhood, right? These were kids who you could probably predict the majority of them are not going to go on to a higher educational institution, might not even make it to community college. Man, we got to do something for them, right? I mean, that's the whole kind of, and let's innovate. Let's try out these different things. If we can target them, and we saw very positive gains with them.
So one other thing,
Let's do another question.
It's real quick. There's a lot of uncaptured learning that goes on out there. So part of the Chicago Summer of Learning is actually aimed to document learning that's not happening already, and badges are a lightweight online digital portal form to do that. So it's not just the effect on the learner, but the fact that the utility to the earner and to the education system at large. If we can capture high-quality learning activities that happen off the map right now, like not in a classroom, so you get a grade that goes on a transcript, then that is one of the avenues through which badges could potentially be beneficial.
Please.
The teacher in me and the gamer in me have always created a cognitive dissonance when I've thought about badges. So can you talk about the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation?
I was waiting. I was so disappointed if someone didn't do that question.
And the child who just goes through the motions of getting the badges rather than really internalizing the knowledge.
Okay, great, excellent. And I love this question, right? So, if there's one thing we know in learning sciences, right? If there's one thing that we have tons of evidence for, is that extrinsic motivators stink in terms of motivating kids to learn, right? What do we mean by extrinsic motivator? It means like, hey, hey everyone, if you learn this, we'll have a pizza party, right? You know, or hey everyone, if we learn this, you can have a sticker, right? You know, so you know, like in other words, that the reward there is totally disconnected from the learning. Badges, right, are not necessarily, when designed well, an extrinsic motivator. They're an external motivator, right? And so what the difference here, right, is that extrinsic, right, means totally disconnected. External means just not directly involved with the natural learning process, right? But they are still connected to the learning. The badge is, when designed well, right, directly connected to what someone's learning. Right? So it's no longer extrinsic, right? It's no longer like I'm getting a badge. I don't know, what I'm getting a badge for. So here, in a very early prototype, right, we gave out badges for like, that you didn't know you could even earn, right? You were like, oh, I got a badge. I didn't even know I could earn a badge, right? Or a badge for like accidental stuff, right? Sometimes in video games, right, it's like, you find that, one corner of the universe you can earn like an achievement, right? Turns out that's not a good idea for education. Right? There's so much in like learning science research that after the fact you're like, duh, right? But it's cool to find the evidence to get like scientific evidence for it. But it turns out that that's not a good idea in education, right? So we actually scrapped a whole bunch of those badges. But for instance, another example of that is that all evidence points to like, if you want badges to have meaning, you got to tell people up front what you could possibly earn those badges for and how to earn them, right? So again, if you think about it, that's a way to kind of take away the extrinsic side, right? Because you're requiring the badge to be directly related to like the learning process, right? This is what you're going to get a badge for. This part of the learning process. This is how you're going to go along. You're going to learn something. You do these steps in terms of your learning. You're going to get a badge. So again, it's not extrinsic. It's just external.
All right. My name's Alex Kenny, and I'm actually, I work for an online university, which this carries a certain stigma with it. But
well, what name? Come on.
Western Governors University, which is actually not for profit, which is actually competency-based. So this isn't about quizzes and stuff like that. It's about that one test. It's actually, I want to have a discussion with you guys later when I have more time about assessments. But anyway. My point is, I work with adults, working adults, who don't have time for the traditional model, and I hear this and I think it's great for some and definitely not great for others. So first of all, is there a way of implementing a system that is completely optional? I mean, while I went through a program and I remember thinking to myself, dadgummit, I just passed a really hard class. I just wish I had some kind of achievement unlocked for me or something like that, some kind of pat on the back. Now, I know that there's other people that wouldn't really necessarily care for that, so is there a system that can be implemented that is optional? And if so, is there even any point?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the kind of optional system, right, is to think about badges, at least in this initial kind of like wave of development, is not as replacements, right? It goes back to like one of our earlier points, right? Like there's so much that goes unassessed, unmeasured. There's so many skills that just you can become a master at them, but there's no way to let the world know, the larger world know you have that, right? So if you focus badges, at least initially, on those areas, right, what you're talking about here is not throwing out grades, right? Not throwing out grades and replacing them necessarily with badges, but just focusing on the things that slip through the cracks, right? And so, the nice thing about that, right, is that you're hopefully providing now a lot more opportunity for people to kind of get recognition for what they do, what they know, and at the same time, you're not, trying to create revolution, right? Which, by the way, you make all good points, and let's add to the point that it's just not going to work necessarily. I mean, it would be awesome if we could just say, we've got a much better idea. Everyone, no more diplomas, right? No more grades, but it's not going to happen. It's just, and maybe that's defeatist, but I think it's also reality. So the way to do it, right, and that kind of system is to target first, right, those people. I mean, then later on, this theoretical like choice, right, like, do you want a badge, do you not want a badge, you don't like it to do it, nothing says you have to display the badge, right, so you can get a badge and a certificate, you can get a badge and a diploma, you don't have to make that choice, it's up to you, and just kind of let, a general consensus created.
I just want to say something that I think gets lost is that some badging systems really suck. And I think that a badge system that's good is designed with whoever the recipient is, with their voice, their thoughts, their desires embedded within that. And so with what we do in the middle school, specifically, the kids were involved in saying, what's important to you? And so it's not just about like, what did you do in school today? It's like, what do you guys do with your life? How do you spend your time? And how can we get this connected into what you do in school? So it's not, no one's forced to do it, some kids do it. What's interesting is it's not the kids necessarily that are the academically, I always do all the things kids. It's the kids who might not have done this otherwise and are maybe struggling. And that's part of the research and trying to see like, okay, when is it working for whom and what can we do next?
Good evening. I'm very interested in learning management systems, and I was hoping you might be able to talk some more about your own experiences if you have implemented learning management systems in your classes, which ones, and if you have found success using badges of those systems.
So CS2N has part of its curriculum based in Moodle.
Moodle, right?
Yeah, and so we have a version of Moodle that's equipped to administer badges for various things. We also combine that though, so that it's not purely run through the LMS. The nice thing about badges is that they exist as digital data. And so if Moodle can talk to the badge database, it can read as well as write, right? And so when you're working through one of the robot virtual worlds, so the 3D virtual robot programming environment, there are levels, there are challenges, there are things to do. And they can be tagged or they can be flagged. They're made in Unity so that they issue badges and they talk to the same server, same database, and they put them in there. So you accumulate data from a lot of different places. As concerns the LMS, that's one of the elements, and it can be connected up. And ultimately, the database containing the badge information, including all the verification and stuff like that, that could feed into a school SIS or student information.
Just a quick follow-up question, yes or no. Are you putting any of your work back into the source, moves into this open source, or is this all stuff you've developed internally and sort of kept?
So I'm not the one who writes the code, but yeah, Moodle is open source, and so if those are modifications to Moodle, then they ought to be going back in. I would talk to my software guy about that.
Thank you.
We gotta work with it. Thanks.
All right, we got 5 minutes, and we can just run through some quick questions here.
So you kind of already answered my question with regards to badges that you know how to get versus ones you don't know how to get. You don't have the criteria, there's no learning value. We implemented a badge system where I work for a system to provoke people to learn all of the facets of the software that we've rolled out. And it was it's like a web-based tool for managing scientific data. We just set up the badges so that if you earned all the badges, you pretty much had used every feature of the program. And it worked really well. When we rolled it out on day one, people who had already used some of these features already had badges, and that everybody kind of already, they had sort of a starting point. People were like, oh, you have this badge, but I don't. And then we snuck a couple of badges in there where we didn't specify the criteria. And what we found was happening with people was those were the badges that was kind of the most discussed. And because people didn't know how to do it, and they were, they weren't meaningless badges, they were for a specific feature, but they provoked people to try to figure out, and they were like less about learning the skill specifically, but they provoked communication between the users, and users who had earned the badge had kind of like helped to reverse engineer and figure out and convey to users. Do you have any comments on that, or just the badges that are not, the criteria not specified up front are totally written off?
Yeah, so just real quickly, there's lots of different ways. I mean, it's just a matter of how you want to analyze it. You want to get real quant about it, right? You can run like factor analysis and see, how the badges are grouped, right? And see. The other thing too is that we have some survey instruments, right, that are based on just kind of established research, like how to measure motivation and badges. You can kind of, the ultimate would be like to, give people, different types of badges to earn and then kind of measure motivation afterwards. You need a certain, large group of people, a certain end, to kind of do those measurements, but we'd be happy to share kind of both of that kind of stuff, that approach, so just let us know. I think, it's data, you need the data to make the decision, so, but the nice thing about badge system, right, is that you don't have to use it, you don't have to base it on technology, but often they are, and so there is a lot of fun things you can do even with simple data.
Yeah, hi. My name is Michael Cillian, I'm from Sweden, and I was saying I have a live stream of the whole event, so if you want to find it, you can find me on Lord Cillian on Twitter, and if you want to see it. And most of my questions have been answered, but I was going to say that grades is a form of badges too, and they don't work on me. And I just want to know if there's an emphasis on motivating people learning before they get the badges, so that grades and badges aren't the essential part of education.
So that's what's interesting, right? So there's two ways to kind of quickly approach it, right? You can think about like what Ross was talking about in terms of pathways, right? And Ross is doing some interesting work in terms of like the size of the badge, right? Which means like at what point do you give someone a badge? And literally, like, is it a small badge or an actual like graphically even large badge, right? But the other thing too is that in some of the research that Meghan was talking about, right? We found that even just kind of introducing the badges from the very beginning, or just telling kind of people that you can earn a badge, right? You almost kind of, your work is done, right? The motivation's already, achieved. So, it becomes almost irrelevant whether they actually earn the badge or not. Like, they're actually going to, you've already had this kind of bonus success for it. So, there's that. I mean, if you want to talk about motivation, Meghan and I can talk about motivation till the cows come home.
And I would just sort of add, just remember the rule is that the badge is not the motivating factor, right? You should add it to an activity that's already motivating by itself.
Yeah, I think that what I can say is that what we are finding in our research is that it's more about the content of the badge than about just earning the badge. And so I think grades, I had that same thought when I first started learning about badges. And I was like, but what's the difference between a grade and a badge? And I think part of it is that badges are an opportunity to look at things that aren't normally assessed. And so it's not just like, a bunch of stuff, check mark. It's like, it's more about what are you bringing to the table? What are you interested in? So there are some badges that we're looking at that are more about like collaboration. Can you collaborate well with others? Which is really not something that you are directly assessed on. And so the idea is to really capture things that are beneficial in children's lives outside of that traditional assessment.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We have to move this discussion to the hallway.
Yeah.